Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Amrit Kal Ki Or series brought to you by Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee Research Foundation. Today we have a very prominent person with us, the editor of the Sunday Guardian newspaper, Ms. JOYEETA BASU. We actually lovingly call her JOYEETA Di, and I will call her JOYEETA Di only. JOYEETA Di, thank you so much for sparing your time from your busy schedule for this small interaction that we had decided to do today. Welcome, first of all. And I will ask you about two important things on which we will have the discussion. One is, Prime Minister of India, Prime PM Narendra Modi's very important visit to Ukraine after his visit in Russia. How do you look at it? And then we'll have a small discussion about the developments in Bangladesh. We look at it from the perspective of India's foreign policy at a crossroad from that way. So I'll hand over to you to what is your understanding about this critical visit in Ukraine, and what do you look at in terms of what India wants to achieve through this?
First of all, thank you, Pothikrit, for inviting me for your show. It's a privilege. I'm really glad that I'm certain many people will be watching it. And when we are talking about the Prime Minister's visit, well, as you know very well, it is to an extent, it is a balancing act. And apart from that fact, when you're looking at it in terms, and you have to do it. I know there are lots of foreign policy observers who are very unhappy that the Prime Minister is going to Ukraine, and especially at a time when Ukraine has attacked Russia. And there is this, peace does not seem to be anywhere in the horizon. But the fact of the matter is that, number one, this visit was decided long back, I think soon after the visit to Moscow, which, by the way, created a flutter in the West in particular. And if you remember, the US ambassador to India, that's kind of, in fact, offensive things that he was saying at that time. He talked about, this is not the time for strategic autonomy. You have to choose a side and all. But you see, the whole point is the kind of reaction that we came across at that time. And the very fact that this was the first time that the Prime Minister was visiting Moscow after the war started. So you see, if he's talking about that we are not, supporting any side, we are in the side of peace. So it is but natural. You have to tell the world that if I am going to Moscow, I will also go to Ukraine. So do not try to box us into any side. When we are talking about strategic autonomy, we actually follow that. I do not want to use the word non-alignment, because you see, that is an old dated concept, and that was more of an economic concept that belonged to the a different decade altogether. But this, what we are talking about, is the age of multilateralism. This is the age of strategic autonomy. So the thing is that to prove that, also it is important for that visit. And of course, yes, Ukraine, the trade deals that are there and all. And you see, in geopolitics, you have to sometimes give a little. Yes. I am looking at the visit from that angle. If we look at it in terms of, has the Ukraine-Russia war, has India's stand on Ukraine created problems for us or not? Yes, it has. You see, the US, I would say, with the kind of attitude that they have towards, they have this my way or the highway kind of thing. Surprisingly, they did not do it with us. Can we do without an alliance or other partnership, strategic partnership with the US in a day and age like this? No, we cannot. If not anything else, just for the sake, even in terms of technological, they still have that technological edge, which we will not get from Russia and China. It's basically anyway into reverse engineering and all that. So for a whole lot of reasons, India-US relationship is very consequential. But there are elements we all know, Pothikrit, in the US administration, because you see, there are all these departments and all, they all function to a large extent in silos. So US State Department runs its own policy. US Defense Department runs its own policy. Or rather, let's put it this way, State Department, which is equivalent to our Ministry of External Affairs, they more often than not override other departments' concerns about certain countries. Say, for example, Defense Department sees the India-US relationship to be very, very important for different reasons that they understand that why you cannot have an Indo-Pacific policy without India being part of this, at the center of it. But the State Department, which is full of people which are anti-India, there is a very strong, I would say, Chinese influence over there. I would say Pakistani influence over there, Islamist influence over there. The woke people, they are very anti-India. So they have been, to an extent, quote unquote, punishing India because of India's stand on Ukraine. I mean, overall, if you look at it, whatever this says, that is how, I mean, whatever these Mr. Garcetti might be saying, or the embassy here might be saying, that is one of the reasons why this visa lag. All right, it was apparently started by Victoria Nuland, and she is of that regime change fame. She came to India. She tried very hard to bring India see, I would say, the US argument and follow the US line. Did not happen, went back. And the buzz is that the visa problem, the delay in issuing visas started from there. Overall, so you see, so Ukraine, I would say rather foolishly, the American establishment, I would say especially the foreign policy establishment, has made Ukraine as a, I would say, touchstone, the benchmark, of US foreign policy. As a result of which they are seeing even their strategic partners through that prism. So in this case, as a result of which problems have happened in India-US relationship, in spite of that, I would say the relationship is doing reasonably well. And that is because India has, I mean, as I have been talking to the people who are in the foreign policy establishment, diplomats and ex-ambassadors and all, they say you have to ensure, forget about the State Department, they are against you. They are not going to approve, they are not going to allow that, that ICET, if you remember, last January 2023, India and US signed.
Innovation for Critical and Emerging Technology.
Yeah. This thing. So you see, if it had come, it would have never come via State Department. I was told that the State Department was totally against that. Completely. So how did India get that? India, they're very clear. We have to have the US National Security Council on our side. And whether you like Biden's foreign policy or not, that is what something India has managed to do. That is what they had even in the Trump era, they have had in the Biden era. Okay, I know Biden has done a lot of things which we may not like, but the fact of the matter is that particular, basically the NSA, Jake Sullivan, Biden, they have proved to be pro-India. But at the same time, I don't think Mr. Blinken is pro-India, or nobody in the state is. Again, I'm going to say Defense Department is very pro-India. So these are the areas that cooperation have been happening. But yes, so much is happening in the world. So much is happening in our neighborhood, Pothikrit, as you know. So, it is when you cannot be seen to be taking all the time. You have to give also a little bit. So let's put this India-Ukraine thing as giving a little bit of space. You understand?
Absolutely, what I'm saying? So, even then, yes, it is a fact that, as we were discussing, that many of India's warships of Russian origin use engines of Ukrainian, which are made in Ukraine, Zoria Marsh Proact. There are these AN-32 planes, which are of Ukrainian origin. They needed an overhaul, which is not happening because of the conflicts in Ukraine. So in a way, this visit is, from that perspective, also pretty critical. However, do you think that if the Americans are thinking that by visit they will try to make India behave that we are on both sides. I don't think that's going to happen, because when it comes to India's foreign policy, I think the tilt is known, and for fair reasons. It is not going to change India's stand on our trusted leadership friendship with Russia, right? And I think, do you also believe that somewhere a messaging would also be given by India that eventually this war is proving to be counterproductive for Ukraine? Do you think some messaging from India would also be going that somewhere? I don't think it's going to be taken by them, because the conflict is being driven by somebody else. Ukraine is just proxy. This is my personal view. It's not somebody else's.
No,
So, how do you
Ukraine,
look at it?
see, we know that, I mean, think of it like this, when the war started sometime, 2 years back, over 2.5 years back, actually, when the war started, initially, in the initial few
Yes.
weeks, there was a possibility that peace will happen.
Yeah.
But it was primarily Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister of UK at that time, and Joe Biden, who did not want Ukraine to, Zelensky and Putin to discuss peace. They were certain that we will be able to get rid of Putin. So you see, for the NATO countries in particular, and in particular the US, I would say, they have this obsession with Russia when their actual enemy is sitting elsewhere. All right.
True.
So the obsession, so basically the Cold War 2 is happening somewhere else. They're still fighting the enemy of Cold War 1, and that enemy, that their enemy is right now, what they are doing with their actions, they're pushing Russia into the arms of China.
Yes.
You see, and the thing is that no, but at the same time, when we are going to talk about India still is known and all, you see, this is something we have to be very careful about. What are we getting from Russia? Because you see, after all, whatever your foreign policy be or may not be, this is again a personal view. I'm certain, I know diplomats, so many of them, they will definitely not agree with me. But if you have to be pragmatic in terms of foreign policy, you cannot possibly forget about your own interest, because ultimately that is what drives any country's foreign policy. Even the US, everybody, it's self-interest that drives your foreign policy. So if you look at what are you getting from Russia, what are you getting from the US? So if you are going, as I said again, in terms of, if you're looking at, your technology, Russia cannot provide you that, not anymore. Okay, that main work is still happening in the US. US is still the thing. Looking at semiconductors, okay, I'm not just talking about military hardware. I'm talking about, there are so many other areas. So semiconductors, the Russians cannot help you. You have to be friends with when you're the US. When you want to build your supply chain resilience, Russians will not be able to help you. When you are going into the Indo-Pacific, Russians are not even willing to call it Indo-Pacific. They follow the Chinese and they call that region Asia-Pacific. They want us to come out of Quad. Okay, Quad, okay, it is kind of right now in some kind of a limbo right now because of, I would say, rather domestic politics for all the countries. But Russia wants us out of the Quad. So yes, what Russia can do for us, you see, one of our main reasons why we are quote unquote pro-Russia is because of what we have in terms of our defense equipment, and because of the reason why, as you talked about Ukraine as well, for our parts, okay, for maintenance. These are the reasons why. So you see, I think still about Mr. Modi has, ever since he has come, he has started diversifying. The country of origin has diversified. He has going into Make in India, but that's a very long way. We are still have not got into the big things. And we are still into smaller, whatever the material that we are making, they're much smaller than, we still have a long way to go. In spite of the diversification, in spite of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think still the dependence is to the level 60% on Russia. And let's not kid
ourselves. But don't you think the energy part also plays a role? Because if we were not taking the oil from Russia, it would have been very difficult to maintain the economic growth at a very high price because of the sanctions.
But that happened later. That happened after the war, much, much later. I am talking about, historically and the way maybe, let's take it this way, say from 22, prior to February 2022. These were the main determinant factors. Oil happened later. And I would say that, the West is intelligent enough, the US in particular, the other countries do not matter. Actually, NATO countries do not matter really. So the US has been intelligent enough not to impose sanctions on the oil part, knowing that it's also going to help them. All right, but this dependence has come much, much later. It has helped us. But in terms of legacy, if you're looking at it, there is no escaping being in good terms with the US. And what is Russia being able to give you? And gradually, we are, if you look at the kind of deals that we have, in military, now we have moved into rifles. There was a factory that was being set up, I think, in Amethi. So you see, so after S-400, we are not talking about S-500. Now, the US also needs to realize we are not going to go for Russian weapons. If you are willing to give us that technology, if you are willing to give us what we want. There was a huge block to that. Gradually, they are opening up. That is why that ICET was so important. That happened in 2023, January. So you see, this is not black and white. So when you say that our tilt is well known, I would differ on that. I think we are truly moving towards what is multilateralism, I would say. But at the same time, when you are looking at, the US is also saying, in fact, Jake Sullivan just a few days back, he said, our mistake was that we did not approach India earlier. Okay, the Russia. So there is a history there. The US recognizes that. So you see, when you are looking at that, but you see, as I said, so we cannot just say that, we are discounting this part.
My question was a little tilt in terms of, we believe in this multipolarism. We believe in having good relation with both sides. It's perhaps the West which has a problem with this multipolarism or being, having good relation with both sides. We never had a problem. We never said that we are anti-US. My another question to you,
Can I just tell you one thing? I know once I get started talking about it, I don't stop. When you're talking about the West has a problem with multilateralism, do they have a trouble with, say, for example, Emmanuel Macron of France? He is one of the biggest votaries of multilateralism. One day he is in Russia, next day he's running to China. He hardly sometimes talks to USA. But the thing is that he is wooing China like anything. He also says, I believe in multilateralism. So you see, the West itself, so it is no longer you are either with us or you're against us. The very fact that all these European countries, all these NATO countries are also actually, in spite of having suffered so badly at the hands of China, I mean, let's face it, from COVID and whatnot, they have shifted their manufacturing out. They are in a mess. One of the reasons being China. And the thing is that, but look at the way they are so happily being, they're wooing China. So that also is multilateralism. So it is, you see, the only problem is that there are people in the, say, State Department, and then there are people who kind of do things their own way, and things become a problem after that.
Yeah. So my last question on the Ukraine issue is this. We hope, this visit actually helps in bringing peace, if that is possible. On the issue of depending on US for critical defense technology, our experience with GEF 404 or for the Tejas, the kind of delay that we are witnessing, or the delay even for something as basic as an Apache helicopter, do you think that it instills confidence that beyond the point you can trust them and they will give what you want.
No, but I think these delays are also primarily procedural delays. Because you see, when I know we in the media tend to get a little upset about these things, but the thing is, the US is also going through an election cycle. They cannot make up their mind whether they want Kamala Harris or Trump. So this is, I would say, for us also, as I said, you see, everybody will have to give a little, and they will have to, when you are taking something, you have to give a little also. Give it some more time, because you see, after all, this was decided just a year back, and then the election season came, and they have all that totally, they have got swept into it. A new administration will be coming a lot. So for our part also, we will also now have to build new relationships. If Kamala Harris comes, will she be coming in with her baggage of what they're calling them, communist, meaning KAMINIST, communist? That is how New York Post is talking about. Will she come with her communist baggage? What happens then? I will talk about it post January 2025, not right now, because they themselves are they are not in a position to take any policy decisions either this way or that way.
Well, it was, I mean, fine, that's one part, but sanctity of contract is something else, because this deal was signed in 2021, the deal for LCA. We have seen anyways. So I think my small understanding is this, there is no denial of the fact that the West is also indispensable. We are not talking about either this side or that side. We have always been about having good relations with both sides. But somewhere I feel that the arm twisting approach is making them a little more unpopular. They could have done it in a little different way. Whatever is happening. Anyways, coming to what is happening in South Asia, and there also we find there is a kind of an external interference, which is certainly not helping. Which is certainly not helping India to have a serene neighborhood, which could have helped India, take the leap towards a $5 trillion economy or a $10 trillion economy eventually. Whether it is about, say, the Americans leaving behind the weapon systems in Afghanistan, and the M4 assault rifles eventually reaching Kashmir with terrorists with armor-piercing steel bullets, or what we witnessed in case of Bangladesh. How do you look at it? Do you think somewhere, whether it is the attack on Quds or whatever is happening in Bangladesh, there is some kind of a desperation of doing too many things at the same time and not being able to control the situation? Quds could not be successful. I don't know whether it was good or bad. That's for the Americans and the Russians and the Ukrainians to decide. Meanwhile, what is happening in Bangladesh, if you ask me, my personal understanding is this: whatever happened, one can say it is their internal affair. I believe in the next 6 months, you might see another revolution in Bangladesh to get rid out of the students and whatever they're doing right now, because they're creating a mess. They're not certainly creating a better country. How do you look at it? The internal aspect of it, the external interference of it, and its impact on other countries in the neighborhood, including India.
Well, since we started talking about the US, and given that US is the central figure in it, I mean, sadly enough, or we know US is a central figure in Bangladesh as well. And this is the problem. You see, we are seeing it only in terms of, why would US be so keen to get Hasina out? And there are conspiracy theories that are swirling in terms of they want to carve out a Christian nation. There is that island they wanted control of, which she did not want to give, and all that. Well, I do not want to go into those areas, but what is definitely, I think, the situation is, there is, from whatever I have heard from my American people I know, and people who know what is going on in the administration, there is a lack of understanding about this region. There is a serious lack of understanding, and the problem is also that the US, and there, as I said, they work in silos, many of these departments. The State Department, which is fully involved in whatever is happening in Bangladesh, sources say, I'm not going to say as the editor of the Sunday Guardian, they are fully involved. But yeah, that is what we are hearing from sources. So you see, there is this serious problem that these woke. The problem with the Biden administration is that the problem with Biden's foreign policy is that he has made his foreign policy about values-based foreign policy. That is something he has been talking about right from the beginning, if you ask me, very foolishly. Because when it comes to values-based foreign policy, the US is the last country to follow such a values-based foreign policy. So if, as I said, in the Ukraine segment, if he actually believed it, they believed in it, they would have wanted peace in Ukraine and Russia. So that has nothing to do with values. Look at what is happening in Pakistan. A prime minister has been jailed, and sham election has been conducted. What happens to US values-based foreign policy? But because of there is this serious belief, and this narrative has been pushed very badly over there in the US about Bangladesh not being a democracy, that this lady is anti-democracy, she is an authoritarian, and there's a huge influence of organizations, I would say front organizations of Muslim Brotherhood on US, say for example, US CIRF. It's almost like a mouthpiece of the, those CARE, that Muslim Council and all. They hobnob with Pakistanis. Too much influence of the Islamists is there in US foreign policy, especially when it comes to this region. So this constant push for, say for example, you must blacklist India, you must blacklist India, you must blacklist Bangladesh. Beyond a point, you see, this thing gets stopped at the senior levels because, India has the heft, which Bangladesh does not have. I was just recently reading, they were saying that we were taking India's concerns into consideration and we were not really moving against Hasina. But the fact is that finally they did, primarily because there is a serious misunderstanding of the situation in Washington about the identity of who they are actually supporting. That Peter Haas guy, who is the ambassador, Dhaka, who is the ambassador in Dhaka, the American ambassador, he was regularly meeting the BNP people. He was making his side very clear. He had picked a side. They were pushing the Jamaat. What was the Biden administration fighting for? They were fighting for Jamaat's right to fight the elections. And who are these Jamaatis? These are the Razakars. They are actually front people of Pakistan. They are the people who had oppressed who had committed massacres, rapes, all sorts of persecution of the Bangladeshis prior to 1971. These are the people. Now, if you do not dig into your history, if you do not know your history, you make everything about human rights and values and democracy without having a full context of it, then what happens? Then you push these forces. And who are the people who are telling say for example, the people in the state that, the Jamaatis, they should be allowed to fight elections and all. These are the same Sino-Wahhabi lobby that we talk about. These are the Wahhabis who have been pushing the Jamaatis' cause. And very foolishly, I would say, the Americans have fallen into that trap, as a result of which all that has happened. They actually perhaps believe that, yes, they have brought in democracy, and they cannot believe that the Indians are so upset about it and saying, no, this is not democracy. You must have seen their spokespeople. They pretend to be independent, but there are these analysts on X, which used to be Twitter. They are constantly pushing the narrative. I'm not going to name them. You must have seen their tweets. They're constantly pushing the narrative. It is the Indian media. They are conspiracy theorists.
Yes.
This is Islamist revolution. This is, the students' revolution and all. No, that is what you would like to believe, because that is what you have told your masters back in Washington. But that is not the case. You see, so there is a sheer lack of understanding. But the only problem they created is that they created so much mess in our neighborhood, they did not realize that they are creating trouble for one of their most important strategic partners. You see,
absolutely.
India...
and to the extent that they had to close down their own embassy. you know, in,
Exactly. Exactly. They unleash the genie from the bottle, the jihadi genie, and now they do not know. I mean, I was hearing someone was telling me they are not going to give any visas to Bangladeshis because now they are worried that these are all jihadis. We don't want them in. So you see, let's put it this way. At one level, they have been taken for a nice little ride by the Talibani, I'm not Talibani, by the Muslim Brotherhood crowd, just the way Pakistan took them nicely for a ride on the Taliban, the Afghanistan situation. So let's put it this way, US, I mean, perhaps because it is very insular, I think it lacks a serious understanding of, regional constraints, how regions function, very little understanding of South Asia, I would say, that I would say the US establishment has.
right. So my last question, I mean, I would ask whether you agree to this or not, that at a time when India actually has emerged as the voice of the global South and has been, in spite of all the challenges, moving ahead to become a $5 trillion economy by 2027, and genuinely believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, do you think that we are at a crossroad? We have, as because some unforeseen challenges are being pushed towards us, whether it is the Ukraine-Russia conflict and its impact on commodity prices eventually, whether it is the crisis in Middle East, or whether the emerging situation in South Asia in our neighborhood, um, things are not being made better for us by our strategic partners. Can we say that? Could they have done a little better for us?
I would not say that, Pothikri. Because
Okay.
you see, after all, if you have to achieve whatever your goal is, you have to, I mean,
In spite
tread
of
the
these, yeah,
water. You have to find your own path.
right.
My concern is elsewhere. My concern is what is happening inside the country.
Yes.
I am really worried, for example, that they had to drop this lateral entry into government. Why? There is this opposition that is not looking beyond caste. This constant push towards, I mean, what's going to happen to merit in this country? If
Yes.
elections are won now on the basis of caste, where are we headed? What can the if, say, for example, one partner today said that, what is that guy's name, Chirag Paswan? Yes, I am against it. What is now stopping Naidu to come and say, oh, this has to be done, that has to be done? I mean, so you see, I am worried more about the internal situation,
Internally,
about
correct.
our political situation. I am not at all worried about our external situation. I mean, for God's sake, these guys will try to come in. They will try to, haven't they already been coming in, these terrorists and all? Of course, more perhaps will be. They will try to stoke some unrest again in Northeast and all. But India is big enough to absorb that shock. India
Right.
is competent enough to handle that. India is standing up to China for how many years now? Eyeball to eyeball, 24/7,
Absolutely.
65 days a year. So I'm very confident about India when it comes to the outside world. What is really worrying me is the inside situation. And you see, I'm supposed to be neutral. I'm a journalist. But the thing is, you see, it really bothers me when I see the direction the opposition politics is taking. And I don't think the ruling party is being able to counter it effectively. So that is worrying me primarily because we do not want to go back to the 1990s or so the problem is inside. The problem is not outside.
So I've always believed, Joyita, that the nationalism push that we have seen in the last 10 years, it will be countered by, inventing fault lines by the adversaries and pushing caste, creed, race, region, religion, institution, and targeting industry. And we have seen all of these have been happening in the last 6 months to 8 months. So yes, we have a multitude of internal and external challenges that we have to deal with to make our growth inclusive. And in spite of all this, you are right. If you have to grow, if you have to become a $10 trillion economy, you have to deal with these things and move ahead. You cannot expect that your adversaries outside or inside will make the path a red carpet for you. So on that note, I would leave the concluding thought to you. Yes.
Yeah. So you see, when you're talking about India, you're absolutely right. I mean, you cannot, in this case, consent you cannot manufacture. Okay? But that is what a democracy is all about. While I am extremely worried about what is happening in the country, about the narrative that is coming, about the constant, the disruptions that are happening. But if this government, I believe this government is stable. You see, inside 1 year, we will know that all this noise about, oh, the government is going, once it starts dying down, I think we are back on, we are on track. But the narrative spinning, that will subside. So you see, but that is what a democracy is all about. That is why, say, China is gradually, okay, I mean, they're still very much owing them, but they're also realizing the problems that they have when, it comes to dealing with an authoritarian country, and why India, in spite of all the mess, in spite of the red tapes, in spite of so many problems, it's an rambunctious democracy. So you will have to accept all that. You will have to carve your path out from that. And there is no reason why we are not going to be $5 trillion economy inside the next few years, couple of years, perhaps.
In fact, everything said and done, a lot of credit to Modi government in terms of ensuring the stability in spite of so many disruptive challenges from outside and inside.
Absolutely. I think we have done very well. You see, I mean, this whole petroleum, bringing this oil business, bringing this oil, this Russia thing, I mean, that actually, I would say, helped us stay, or we did not get into recession. And it also actually helped countries like the US. They were the ones who were buying petroleum products, which the Russian oil we had refined, they were buying those petroleum products from us. So you see, we also saved the world, to the Western world to a large extent.
On that note, thank you so much, JOYEETA, for this wonderful interaction. And we look forward to more such interaction with you, sometimes at the office, in those programs, and, sometimes to the podcast. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much. On that note, we conclude today's talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pothikrit, for inviting me. I look forward to having another session with you sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.